in the entryway. And whether it's your first visit or your 1,000th, we are glad you came. I have a few announcements to share with you today. We will be collecting the cards for joys and sorrows after our first hymn. Please fill them out or type in the chat box on Zoom if you have something you would like to share. I see there are no children, so if children do arrive, childcare is provided by KMLs. Are there any other announcements for the good of the community? Okay. As we prepare to be fully together, I remind you to silence your phones and devices. We now enter a space of worship. I invite you to join with me in our chalice lighting words as the flame is lit. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together.
On your life will be no plus that you need that some
Good morning, everyone. A couple of years ago, I was at Omega. I had facilitated a deaf cafe there. And a beloved teacher of ours, Nancy Aroney, was teaching a class, a writing class. And we decided that we should collaborate in some way. So we decided that her class would write a love letter to death. And so this is my love letter to death. Dear Death, I've thought about you for all of my life, starting with the terror of burning in hell that is punishment for my sins, or so the Southern Baptist Church insisted. I've thought about what it will be like to not be, and I can't even imagine that, no matter how hard I try. I've wondered about if the dead feel lonely in that liminal space between form and formless. I've wondered how you manage to keep living and going on day after day when everyone hates, fears, or denies you. How awful it must be to be invisible, even when you're standing by someone's bedside holding their hand and being their compassionate companion into the unknown. I've thought, actually ruminated about how lonely you must be since no one will even allow your name to cross their lips. The Amish have nothing on you in terms of being shunned. I've thought about how no one appreciates that all life comes from you, that no life would exist without the rich soil that comes from breaking down the form we carried while alive. I often remember the story of Lucretius, the philosopher who asked an applicant worried about your arrival, well, were you scared of the time before you were born? No? Then why are you scared of the time after you die? Death, you are the lover who returns us to the pure consciousness and unconditional love from where we came. You are the second portal to that wide open expanse of pure consciousness and continuing miracle. You are not the enemy, but a blessed friend, and I'm sorry for how badly you're treated here. Can you forgive us for disrespecting you so horribly? Can you love us when we have never loved you? I know you can, because I know you hold all of the mysteries that we fear we are not large enough to contain. Signed, and admire.
Our opening hymn this morning is in the big hymnal number 324, where my free spirit onward leads. Please rise as you're willing and able and join us to sing. My free spirit onward leads, well then shall be my way. I journey night and day. I aim to touch my Lord, as once I bore my youth. I celebrate thy swift glory. I celebrate death soon. My family is like good fight to mother made a child. Jesus, be they fame or be they blood. My family of promise, it was all living things. The ocean deep are born of wings. I am singing, well then shall we mine. I sing and sing with as it's like eternity sleeps.
We are a community that holds one another in our celebrations and in our pain. We welcome you to share your joys and sorrows by writing them down on the card you found on your chair and placing it in the basket when it comes by you, or by typing them in the chat box in Zoom. Know that whatever your heart is holding today, whether shared or not, we are with you.
Hardly come to pass. Just let it go.
This morning, I'm doing a reading called For Grief by one of my favorite poets and spiritual teachers, John O'Donohue. When you lose someone you love, your life becomes strange. The ground beneath you gets fragile. Your thoughts make your eyes unsure. And some dead echo drags your voice down where words have no confidence. Your heart has grown heavy with loss. And even though this loss has wounded others too, no one knows what has been taken from you when the silence of absence deepens. Flickers of guilt kindle regret for all that was left unsaid or undone. There are days when you wake up happy again inside the fullness of life until the moment breaks and you are thrown back onto the black tide of loss. Days when you have your heart back, you're able to function well until in the middle of work or encounter, suddenly with no warning, you are ambushed by grief. It becomes hard to trust yourself. All you can depend on now is that sorrow will remain faithful to itself. More than you, it knows its way and will find the right time to pull and pull the rope of grief until that coiled hill of tears has reduced to its last drop. Gradually, you will learn acquaintance with the invisible form of your departed. And when the work of grief is done, the wound of loss will heal, and you will have learned to wean your eyes from that gap in the air and be able to enter the hearth in your soul where your loved one has awaited your return all the time.
Now is the time in our service to join together in the spiritual practice of generosity. Our gifts of both time and money support our church and its work. Each week, we would like to spotlight a group or committee and thank them for their gift of time. This week, the group is the gardeners. As you see, we have some beautiful flowers out in front. And if you'd like to help maintain those gardens, you can contact Lynn Cronice. Probably the best way to do that is to sign up on the interest list on the refrigerator, and she will get in touch with you when there's a garden party, garden work party, that is. 1/4 of our plate collection for the summer season goes to Camp Adirondack. Founded in 1951 by the Universalists, Adirondack is a radically inclusive camp and conference center with a mission to provide an environment that inspires people to explore responsible roles in the web of life through physical, mental, and spiritual challenges. You can give to this morning's offering by placing cash or a check into the basket or by one of the options on your screen. Please make a note that your gift is intended for today's offering. We now gratefully accept the offering. Life is full of joys and sorrows. Today, we have a concern for friends in crisis, and at the same time, a joy for the beauty of nature all around us. I assume a joy for the rediscovery, I think it's of the Champagne Valley, and a joy for looking forward to an upcoming trip. And also a big joy for Bob Gordon returning home from the hospital. And I hope that perhaps he's watching right now. I will now drop a stone for these and all the joys and sorrows left in the silence of our hearts. Whatever's in your heart today, we are with you. At this time, if there are any children who would like childcare, you may go downstairs with Kaya. It's nice and cool down there, I might add.
So a few years ago, my wife Linda and I came across this Vimeo that we're going to see next, called The Life of Death. And we fell in love with it right away, and we have watched it over and over across the years. Each time, even though it's quite simplistic and straightforward, it's like we sink deeper into this realization that in the Vimeo, death has fallen in love with life. I don't know when I started to think about death, but I know it was early on. And the burning in hell part after death, even though, come on, how much sin can a 6 or 7-year-old child have committed? Kept death and terror in front of my mind for almost 4 decades. But I always have wanted to talk about death and any other taboo subjects, since they're always the most interesting. And I've grown increasingly weary of the willful blindness that has resulted in toxic positivity and avoidance of any topics that might be challenging. We wildly celebrate the birth of children, even though we have 5 billion more people on the planet than she can sustain, and yet treat death as the enemy. Death is as natural a phenomenon as birth, and returns us to the place. I was trying to enter the 21st century with my computer. Don't touch this. Don't touch it. Hold on. Sorry about that. Death is as natural a phenomena as birth and returns us to the place from where we came. Instead of having gratitude for the number of decades we've been gifted, so many of us fight for more and more and more, even when more time equates to more suffering. Stephen Jenkinson, in his must-read book, Die Wise, points out that when we keep insisting that people fight, plead with them not to give up, we are not prolonging their lives as much as we are prolonging their suffering. Not just physical suffering, but emotional and spiritual suffering, exacerbated by their loved ones insisting they stay long after life has any meaning for them. Those friends and relatives would rather the suffering body remain alive, even though the loved one is longing for release. Our lives are a very short span between entering and departing a mystery. Birth and death bring us to and take us from that vast universal consciousness that holds us all in the cradle of unconditional love. It is one manifestation of privilege that we always want more, rather than being grateful for the time that we've had together. I can fall into this trap as quickly and completely as the next person. Our precious dog Buddy, who is the embodiment of love, goodwill, and grace, has a very aggressive cancer. It's always in the back of my mind that every day brings him closer to death and brings Linda and me closer to the grief that will accompany his departure. Some days I weep at the thought of him no longer gracing our days, but I quickly remember to be grateful for the 7.5 years we've been given with him. For most of us, death is respite from pain, physical or psychological, from exhaustion and disease. I think of the line in John Mellencamp's song, "Oh yeah, life goes on, long after the thrill of living is done." And yet so many times the dying are not allowed to exit gracefully, but instead are held there by the hands that won't let them go and the voices that claim to love them. Death and the events surrounding it are also one of the biggest social justice issues of our time. The more privileged and wealthy one is, the better medical care they receive and the better pain management attention they get. The poor are left to die often in pain and much earlier than necessary if we actually had a fair and equitable healthcare system in this country. Not talking about death exponentially increases our fear of it. We know that naming our fears, sitting with them intentionally, honoring them as our most valued teachers, makes us more aware that these physical lives are finite and precious and not to be squandered in pursuit of shiny baubles and badges of busyness. When we contemplate death, 5 times a day is recommended by many Buddhist teachers, and really embody that awareness, we become free to shape our legacies according to our most deeply held values. When we allow others the gift of talking about their impending death, we give them a precious opportunity to be heard about the most important and final event of their life. My stepmother died quite young, at the age of 50, of colon cancer. My father pretended it wasn't happening, as did her mother and her twin grown daughters. They kept pushing for her to fight until one day she collapsed in my father's arms and begged him, sobbing, not to let them hurt her anymore. Even then, though, her family would not allow her to speak about her death. One day when she was alone in the apartment, I visited her and asked if she would like to talk about dying. Her feelings, which she had been forced to dam up, came bursting out in a river of rage, sadness, curiosity, fear, longing, and desire for relief. She talked for a very long time, and I listened, honored to be invited into her thoughts and feelings and reality. That was the first time that I had thought about working with hospice because they had taken such loving care of her. The second time I thought seriously about my role in assisting those who are transitioning came when my friend Mary was dying of cancer. She was in the hospice house in Arlington, Virginia, the same one that Jenny, my stepmother, had died in. I visited her the last night of her life and played the piano for her for about an hour. The staff had told me that she had been non-responsive and unconscious for the past 24 hours. They told me that perhaps she wouldn't know I was there. I played for her, and then I went to her bed and took her hand and told her I would return the next day. She squeezed my hand hard in acknowledgement of my presence. Her mom had been a pianist and teacher, as was I, and I believe that she felt connection to me and to her mother in that hour. Mary let go that night and died peacefully. Music is often the bridge that invites people to enter that twilight without fear or trepidation. It calms the soul and whispers to the heart that they are safe and loved and will be cared for in the next part of the mystery. As often happens, life gets in the way of our best intentions, and that happened for me. I met the love of my life shortly after, and began to build our life together, as well as returning to graduate work in humane education and lay leadership in the Unitarian Church. All four of our parents died, and we became snowbirds with beautiful communities of friends in New York and Florida. But end-of-life work kept tapping me on the shoulder and wouldn't leave me alone. So I began attending death cafes, fell in love with the practice, and have been facilitating them for about 5 years now. Death cafes are gatherings of people who come together for the express purpose of talking about death. These conversations are not morbid or morose, as many people imagine, but are tender, poignant, and sometimes hilarious sharing of hearts. I then learned about end-of-life doulas and took that training in the summer of 2019. End-of-life doulas provide emotional support to the dying person and their loved ones. I have no interest in the legalities of dying nor the medical side of it, and leave those two areas to the experts in those fields. I served as end-of-life doula to a woman in Florida for 2.5 years as she processed her thoughts and feelings about self-deliverance after being diagnosed with Alzheimer's and suffering a great deal of increasingly difficult physical pain. She accomplished her suicide last October, and I talked to her the day before, making sure she had what she needed to feel safe and complete. That 2.5 years was an enormous gift to me, as I was allowed into her most heartfelt thoughts and concerns and hopes. She was a generous person to the end, not wanting to use perhaps a decade of resources to keep her alive that could be used to advantage for others. I'm deeply indebted to the Final Exit Network and their compassionate work with the dying. This description comes from Wikipedia. Final Exit Network is an American 501c3 nonprofit right to die advocacy group incorporated under Florida law. It holds that mentally competent adults facing intolerable suffering due to physical illness have a right to voluntarily end their lives. After reviews of medical records and confirmation of mental capacity, qualified applicants are directed to resources that provide guidance in how to painlessly end one's life. Final Exit Network does not encourage suicide and does not provide physical assistance. Their role is to serve as compassionate advisors and witnesses. The organization, as you can imagine, has occasionally been subject of controversy and criticism, with most opposition coming from fundamentalist religious organizations and right-to-life groups. Final Exit was founded in 2004 by former members of the Hemlock Society. My father belonged to that for decades, including that organization's co-founders, Derek Humphrey and Dr. Faye Gersh. Hemlock was founded in 1980, went through several mergers and name changes before emerging as Compassionate and Choices. Taking its name from Humphrey's 1991 book, Final Exit, the network was based on Hemlock's discontinued Caring Friends program. The focus on compassion and choices is legalizing medical aid in dying, while Final Exit Network focuses on direct support of its clients. After initially contacting Final Exit, applicants must provide their medical records to verify the physical illness. After the medical records are verified, 2 exit guides are assigned, one of whom has the role of senior exit guide. Before an applicant is approved, both exit guides will interview the applicant and any family members who may be involved. The senior exit guide ultimately decides whether the applicant is eligible for their services. The exit guides provide education about Final Exit Network's methodology, advice regarding the discovery of remains, facilitation of conversations with friends and family, and the option of a compassionate bedside presence during the applicant's death. I'd like to invite you all to a Death Cafe this coming Saturday at the Bhakti Barn in Macedon. We're going to shake it up a little bit. It's going to be a potluck and a Death Cafe. If you need more information on that, you can either contact me on Messenger, Facebook, or my email. So 4 o'clock this coming Saturday, July 1st. One woman who had attended one of my Death Cafes at Omega stopped me the next day. Grinning ear to ear, she gushed, "I had so much fun last night." And remember, talking about death won't kill you, but not talking about it might diminish your life in so many ways. The protagonist in The Secret Life of Bees, Lily Owens, says, quote, "Someone who thinks death is the scariest thing doesn't know a thing about life."
Woke up this morning, put on my slippers, walked in the kitchen and died. And oh, what a feeling when my soul went through the ceiling. And I up into heaven I did ride. When I got there, they did say, "Oh, it happened this way. You slipped on the floor and hit your head. And all the angels say, just before you passed away, these were the very last words that you said. Please don't bury me down in the cold, cold ground. No, I'd rather have them cut me up, pass me all around. From a rain and a hurricane and the blind can have my eyes, and the deaf can take both of my ears if they don't find the side. Get my stomach to Milwaukee if they run out of beer. Put my socks in a cedar box, just get them out of here. Well, Mr. Milo can have my heart. Look out, I got your nose. Sell my heart to the junk man and give my love to Rose. And please don't bury me down in the cold, cold ground. No, I'd rather have you cut me up, pass me all around. Throw my brain in a hurricane and blind and my eyes. That can take both of my ears if they don't find the sound. Well, get my feet to the boots, careless, fancy free. Get my knees to the needy, don't pull that stuff on me. Hand down my walking cane, it's a single hell of a lot. Set my mouth way down south and kiss my ass goodbye. Don't bury me down in the cold, cold ground. But I'd rather have a cut me up, pass me all around. Throw my brain in a hurricane and the blind can have my eyes. And hey, both my ears if they don't mind the sound.
Thank you, Bill. Our benediction this morning are the words of David White, called The Well of Grief. Those who will not slip beneath the still surface on the well of grief, turning down through its black water to the place we cannot breathe, Here we'll never know the source from which we drink the secret water, cold and clear, nor find in the darkness glimmering the small round coins thrown by those who wished for something else.